Petition for the renaming of Dudley Square to Nubian Square. My name is City Councilor at Large Michael Flaherty, here with my colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey. I see City Councilor Ed Flynn and City Councilor Matt O'Malley, and others will be joining us. This petition seeks council approval for the placement of a local non-binding public opinion advisory question on the ballot at the next regular municipal election, which is on November the 5th, 2019. The petition includes the signature of at least 10 registered voters in the City of Boston that has been examined by the Board of Election Commissioners and deemed to be sufficient. Pursuant to Mass General Laws, Chapter 53, Section 18A, a non-binding public opinion question may be placed on the ballot for regular municipal election no later than 35 days before regular municipal election by a vote of the City Council and with the approval of the Mayor. The language of this question, proposed question, was presented through a memo which was submitted to this council through Chief of Civic Engagement Jerome Smith, who was here with us, who also worked with the Nubian Square Coalition. The question specifically is quoted as, do you support the renaming / changing of Dudley Square to Nubian Square? Question mark, end quote. Before I turn it over to our panelists, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, City Councilor Kim Janey, for opening comments, as well as my colleagues, Councilor Flynn and Councilor O'Malley. Chair recognizes Councilor Kim Janey.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank and acknowledge the panel before us. I also want to recognize all of those who are in attendance, many of whom are organizing this effort. Just to kind of put this in somewhat of some context, at least for me and my perspective, when I grew up as a little girl growing up in Roxbury, you know, my parents taught me the 7 principles of Kwanzaa, Kujichagulia being one of them, certainly one of my favorites, which means self-determination. And that pretty much is that a people should have the ability to name themselves and define themselves. So in that spirit, we are here in this hearing to talk about the process for a ballot question. In terms of my advocacy for my district as a District 7 City Councilor, I certainly applaud the grassroots efforts of those in this room who have brought this process to where we are today in terms of having a City Council hearing to talk about a potential ballot question for November. And that is kind of rooted in changing the name for Dudley Square. I am deeply grateful for the efforts across our country in terms of looking at names of buildings or statues or squares and really trying to come to terms with our country's racist past as well as present. And so I know there are efforts all over the country to do just that. And I certainly applaud that. And the organizers of this effort, many of whom are in the room, are, I believe, working in that spirit. In terms of my advocacy as a city councilor, while I think what we call ourselves is important and there is an effort to kind of change the name, I have been focused on changing the conditions. What I recognize as a city councilor is that even if we change the name tomorrow, that I still have a wealth gap, or we have a wealth gap in this city of Boston, which means that black families in our city have a net worth of $8 compared to white families, which is $247,500. We still have high unemployment. We still have schools that we need to invest in. We still have health disparities. And so I think changing the name and having this conversation is a very important conversation. I spend the vast majority of my time really trying to change the conditions for the people who live in my district. That being said, I think this is an important conversation to have. I think it is important for the people to decide for themselves, and so this will provide that opportunity for them to decide for themselves what to be called. And I'm looking forward to having this conversation and understanding all of the procedures that we have to go through so that, in fact, the community can decide for itself what to call itself. So again, thank you to the panelists for being here. Thank you to all of the organizers who have been working hard to bring this issue to light and to give Roxbury residents the opportunity to say for themselves, to define themselves, to call themselves what they want to be called. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Janey. Councilor Flynn, any opening comments?
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty, and I agree with Councilor Janey. I think she said it perfectly, and I stand with Councilor Janey in her comments before the meeting. I had an opportunity to talk to a woman in the audience, and we talked about the incredible role and contribution of African-American veterans, especially during World War II, and they haven't been properly recognized. At the hearing that we just had with Age Strong, we also talked about our Native American community. And at one time, South Boston had a large Native American community, and we also talked about the Navajo code talkers. But there's so many ethnic groups that have done so much great work, but they're not really treated with the respect and the dignity that they deserve. I called for a public health hearing with Councilor Janey on public health issues impacting communities of color, African American, Latino, and Asian. Those are the issues that I've been focused on. I know my colleagues certainly have been focused on them much longer than I have. But those are the types of issues that I want to continue working on, working with all of my colleagues. We talked recently about language access. We talked about our immigrant community, food access, but we want to make sure Boston is a city that's open and accessible to everybody, regardless of your ability to speak English, regardless of your financial situation, and your immigration status. So I'm just proud of the outstanding work of my colleagues and the mayor's office as well. And I'm looking to learn more about this project, and I just want to say thank you to the outstanding work of Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Chair recognizes Councilor O'Malley for an opening.
I'm all set. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Waiving opening. So welcome, I see Jerome Smith, Chief of Civic Engagement, Neighborhood Services Director, also Anita Tavares. I think this may be your first official council hearing as the interim commissioner of the election department, and no stranger to this body is someone that has a wealth of knowledge with respect to elections, is the Assistant Registrar, Sabino Piemonte. So welcome, everybody, and I'll throw it over to Jerome if you could give an opening on behalf of the panel, and then we'll have some questions from the council to the panel, and then we'll go to public testimony. Ask that you stick around for public testimony.
Absolutely, Councilor.
And for those that are here, public testimony, if you wish to participate and offer public testimony, just sign the sheet in over on the left-hand side, and we'll be working from both of those microphones for public testimony at the appropriate time. So, Jerome, you have the floor.
Fantastic. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the
And
council.
before I forget, my former colleague is here, City Councilor Chuck Turner, who will be offering public testimony, but just want to recognize Chuck and his service to the city and the City Council. Thank you, Jerome.
Awesome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee and the council. My name is Jerome Smith, and I am the Chief of Civic Engagement for the City of Boston, and I appreciate the council's thoughtful time today for us to discuss something that's not common in the City of Boston, and that is the non-binding public opinion advisory questions. The way that we decided the administration would come here to present information to the council is that I was here from the beginning working with the Nubian Square Coalition as they were thinking through the possibilities about how to engage this process. And my colleagues from the election department are here for the council's questions that are purely technical about the ballot and the times and the dates and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that we were able to give you as much information as possible about this. We met with the Nubian Square Coalition months back into last year, where they had began their own organizing efforts of hanging signs in Dudley Square, saying Nubian Square, to bring to the attention of the residents that they should start thinking about a change in their community. They subsequently began, as any community group does, letter writing campaigns to the administration and to the city, asking us for a process. It was around the time where the city was having the discussions around changing Yawkey Way to Jersey Street. So as we were talking with the Nubian Square Coalition, we found that the square, a commercial district or something as the name of Dudley Square, is larger and impacts more people than the simple name change of a street. and the city has a process for the name changing of street through the Public Improvement Commission. Unfortunately, because of the scale of the name change, we have a number of businesses in Dudley whose name is Dudley Square. There are a lot of more impacted players. So the avenue of which the applicants originally wanted to go of the street changing was not available because, again, we're changing a large neighborhood identity as opposed to just a street name. So we sat and thought around how we could accomplish this goal, what would be the best way to gauge public sentiment, again, because of this is an unprecedented step. And then in a meeting with the mayor and the Newberry Square Coalition personally, the mayor threw out the idea, would they pursue the non-binding advisory question as an option? The coalition can speak for themselves about their timeline. They interacted with us and said that that would be something that they were interested with. They had asked for assistance from the administration because, again, this is the first time that many of us have done this. The mayor had offered my assistance along with other members of the administration to walk the group through the process so that it's not creating a new process. It's written in our charter and written in state law how to get a ballot question on, but how to walk the community through it. We as the administration support the Nubian Square Coalition's effort to engage residents of Roxbury in this ballot question. The administration does not have a position on what the name should be, should the name change, or what it should be. He believes, as the councilor said, that this should be something that is organically discussed with residents of Roxbury and have them give us back that feedback. As far as a timetable separate of the ballot question, in case the question comes up, it is a non-binding advisory question, okay? And what that means is that for the council's edification to something simpler that you guys have engaged in previously, think of it as polling. Any polling that an elected official would do to their community. So think of it less as the marijuana question, which codified something into state law. Think of it more as a polling question where you're getting feedback from the community, and that way you can then slice and dice the data and use it as you see fit. All this data will be publicly, just like your election results this year, we post online. The same information will be posted online. Anybody can use this data and information. The coalition members will then take that data information and then meet with the PIC commission and the chair to create new rules and regulations should it pass. The PIC will then look at that data. They will use that data as evidence that the neighborhood, the community does in fact support a name change. We'll create regs and move it through. So I just want that clarity for the council that on November, I forgot the date, 5th,
The
election day.
November 5th.
I know you know, Counselor. I want the council to be clear, it's not changing on November 5th. There will be a time period where the coalition members will be working with the PIC to get the regs in, but then we do anticipate that change should the question win, and a large number of residents support the change to Nubian Square. That will happen this fall into winter, and then the name of the square will be changed. I have to say that as the chief of civic engagement, I'm looking at this in a different lens, again, less as whether or not the name should be changed, but more about how we communicate with our residents and how we actually get intake and information from them. I've never personally participated in a ballot initiative such as this. It is available to every resident. As the chair mentioned in the beginning, it's just 10 registered voters can sign it, get approved by the Election Commission, and then it begins this process that we have for checks and balance. But I'm very interested in seeing this play out. I do believe that the Nubian Square Coalition has sincerity behind what they're trying to organize. They truly feel that this is very important for their community to have this discussion. I do not doubt that. And I wholeheartedly want to help them accomplish that goal. That's why we have stepped up to do as much as we can to provide support, answer questions that normally are not city function, but they were just looking for advice. We are offering that because we actually want them to be successful in having the conversation. We originally had proposed to them, we had made an error when we first started, and you might hear from some of the coalition members, where we were under the impression that the special act that was passed by the legislature allowed us to target a neighborhood for these questions. It had happened in East Boston for gaming. So in our quickness in the beginning to kind of help them and move them in that direction, we were all geared in that spot that it would be a Roxbury question. Unfortunately, the law department came back and wrote us a legal memo that we then gave to the coalition where the city is not does not have the authority to do district-specific or neighborhood-specific questions. We are only by charter allowed to do citywide questions. So yes, there will be other counselors that they will see this question on the ballot. Again, I want to hit home with the counselors that this is a non-binding public advisory question. It is the way we currently are allowed to do this. Yes, the whole city can vote upon this. And then we had the law department write up a little explanation in their conclusion that says Section 18A creates a mechanism to place a non-binding public opinion advisory question on the citywide ballot. It does not dictate how the results of any such non-binding question should be used or interpreted by public officials, and city boards. Policymakers remain free to consider the results of such questions in neighborhoods particularly impacted by the subject matter of the question. So while we are engaging in this citywide public question, from my perspective as Chief of Civic Engagement, I think it's great that we are actually having residents engage in a dialogue to how to change their community. But how we look at the results, we have sat with the Nubian Square Coalition, and we believe that when sitting with the chair of the PIC, that we will pay extra special detail to the votes of the precincts of Roxbury. The residents of Roxbury live in this business. This is their major business, one of their major business districts. We want to make sure that we hear them as we are making determinations. So as we look at the polling data, we will be giving a keen eye to the way that the wards and precincts of Roxbury have decided to vote. I raise this because I'm sure there will be a conversation about this with the council, because I think that if the council supports allowing this ballot question to move forward, I would like to just put a little flag for the council that maybe we can talk about how we can possibly pass a home rule that gives the city of Boston the authority that they have given us for gaming, because it's in a special act. So they were wise enough to give the city the ability to do this on its own when it's regarding gaming. They should consider giving us the authority to do this and talk to our residents in such a organized way, whether it's by the district council districts or whether we can actually break neighborhoods down. We should consider, if it's something that the council thinks is interesting to the city, we should consider the opportunity of doing that and in reaching out and asking for the authority. We already have precedent. And I think that the proponents of the question were a little daunted when I had to come back officially tell them that it was citywide, because we were, for months, we were going for Roxbury. We identified the precincts, and we all ready to go. And then I had to unfortunately tell them that I personally made a mistake when I presented them information and presented them with the new law memo. So it was a little frustrating for them, definitely, because they go from a mentality of just worrying about Roxbury to worrying about citywide. But I think that with the assistance and help and support that we're trying to provide this citizen effort, I think that we can get to a place where they can have a good conversation with the people that they're trying to reach, and hopefully has a good outcome in November.
And then, Jerome, just for the record, could we have a copy of that, the legal
Absolutely.
memo, just for
Yep.
our file? And then, and if the council doesn't pass it, it's a moot point. It sort of dies in committee, I guess.
So the election commission can talk about that, but ultimately, yes, the checks and balance to this has to be passage of the council and the signature of the mayor. Should the council vote this down, or should the mayor not sign it, the citizens will have to go out and get 10% of the registered voters, and that's like 40,000 signatures.
And that's a good point. So 10% of the registered voters in Roxbury, or 10% of the
City,
registered voters citywide?
city. And that's about 40,000 registered voters.
Gotcha. Anything additional from the election commission at all?
Good, Commissioner.
We just want to add that this will have minimal impact on us from an administrative perspective. All we need is the language, which Jerome has provided to us, and enough time to translate this to get this onto the ballot for November. Aside from that, we don't see a major impact from our perspective.
Right. And it would be some type of like vote no on question. Is it one of those? It'll be question one. Is it going to be given a number or a title?
It will be at the end of the ballot. We're trying to make it into a one-page ballot. So right now we're working to use an 8.5 by 11. Should we have to use an 8.5 by 14 piece of paper to keep everything on a one page? It will be at the bottom of the page, just as a simple yes and no answer, and translated into multiple languages.
And then the actual, what the people are voting on will be, I guess, transcribed on the ballot, and obviously in multiple languages for our constituents.
Correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah, you'll see, as some of us political hacks who are on refreshing the city website on election night, you'll see live data coming. I'm one of those people. Me too. You'll see live data coming in, but the commissioner was great yesterday to tell me, and I haven't told the members of the coalition yet, that there's 10 days for it to be certified. So it's not, so even though we see the website, I can't officially tell everybody that it officially won until it's certified, and that's typically 10 days after election day.
And that's certified by the election commissioner?
Yes, so we have 10 days because we have the military and overseas ballots. We have 10 days after the election to receive those ballots, so we cannot certify the results until that point. And this question will be titled Question 1, and it'll be titled Non-Binding Public Advisory Question, followed by the question.
Question.
And then is there any state approval? Secretary of State have to sign off on anything, or anyone
Nope.
in the state? That's great. Thank you. Anything additional, Sabino, that at this point?
No, just one thing to add is, if there's signatures, that will impact our office. So if they come up with the 40,000 signatures in case that you guys do not certify this or prove it to go on a ballot, that will impact us immensely.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to maybe just get into the coalition, if I can ask Siddiqui Cambone to make his way to that microphone. Ask the panel stay for the
Oh, you're gonna-
test.
okay.
Yeah, they're going to go right to the microphones and then go back to my colleagues for questions. So if Siddiqui can make his way to that first microphone, and if Chuck Turner can make his way to that second microphone, and then after Siddiqui, there'll be Eleanor Abdal Kalag Williams, and then after former Councilor Turner will be Louis Elisa. So welcome, good to see you, and introduce yourself for the record, and you have the floor.
Sure. Appreciate it. Just want to say good day to everyone. My name is Siddiqui Cambone, and I'm the director of the Black Community Information Center and also chairman of the Nubian Square Coalition. So essentially what it is that in terms of the Information Center, we're an all-volunteer organization located in Dorchester, Mass. We have a building called the Imani House, and we've been around for several years. So, of course, as was mentioned by the council, there's been this national phenomenon around taking down, monuments and symbols representing folks who were basically racist in terms of their perspective and their actions. And so, several years ago, our organization led the effort to have the former Washington Park renamed Malcolm X Park because, George Washington was a slave owner, and we felt that was inappropriate. Subsequently, what happened was someone had mentioned to me that, did you know that the Dudley family was involved in some level around the slave trade? And that led to our efforts with the assistance of then Councilor Turner's office to move to have New Dudley Street renamed Malcolm X Boulevard. Then what happened, people said, well, what about, there are other names that represent the Dudley family. So over 5 years ago, we started a campaign to have Dudley Square, and we also at some point want to see the station renamed Nubian Square. And, I won't get into the details, but, the Nubians, that was an African empire from, many centuries ago and what have you, and that's how we reached consensus in the community around that name. And so the first couple of years, we were working to educate the community as to why we felt that the name change was appropriate. We have a petition with over 2,000 names on it. We had various locations like a Nubian Notion and what have you for folks to sign on. And we've really been pleased about the support and momentum to the extent that we have elected officials, religious institutions, neighborhood associations, and what we're finding is that folks pretty much in general are in support of this name change. And we tell folks that the primary reasons why we're doing this is that, number one, we felt it was inappropriate to have the name of a family that had a slavery affiliation in terms of, whether it was Thomas as governor or his son Joseph, who both were governors and basically had oversight in terms of what the policy was about slavery, that was inappropriate that in our primary commercial shopping district that we have a name honoring that family. And so secondly, we also wanted to do a partial tribute to the former Nubian Notion that served our community for over 50 years. And thirdly, and very importantly, we want to send a message to the forces of gentrification that we as, black and brown people in our community intend to fight for the land that we presently reside on. So as was mentioned, after getting all the support and the momentum, that's how we came up with the name a couple of years ago of the Nubian Square Coalition, because of all the folks who are becoming involved in what we're doing, supporting what we're doing. And so what we had wanted was to go before, to have a community meeting and then go before the PIC for a decision, vis-a-vis something similar to like what happened with Yawkey Way and things of that nature. So we met with the mayor and some of the staff, including Jerome, I believe it was March the 8th. And so we came into the meeting prepared to discuss the possibility of what we had proposed about the community meeting, what have you. And that's when the proposal was made about, considering a ballot question that would essentially put it on the municipal ballot on November the 5th, and then put it in the hands of the people to decide as to whether or not the name should be changed. And so we in the coalition felt that that was a fair proposal, and we were prepared to do the work. And so where we are right now is that a couple of months before the election, is that, we have, we're an official campaign, and we feel that it's really important. There are statements made that, just changing a name is a symbolic action, and we feel that it's much more than a symbolic act, because we would hope that the residents will feel like, based from a cultural perspective, that this is our family shopping district. We're going to be bringing our families there, and we'll encourage young folks to consider actually establishing their businesses there, vis-a-vis from the framework that was described by Councilor Janey. And so we're here today asking, and let me preface it by saying the fact we understand, based on we've gotten a lot of information from Jerome and others, that in order for this to go on the ballot, we need the support of the mayor. My understanding is we have that support, and that we'd have to go before the council in order to be able to get the support from the council to, in fact, say, yes, we, in fact, support this question being on the ballot November 5th for it to actually happen and become a ballot question. So that's why we are here today asking the council to, in fact, vote in support of our call for this to be on the ballot November 5th, 2019.
Thank you very much, Siddiqui. Welcome back, Chuck.
Okay.
You just state your name and affiliation for the record, and you have the floor.
My name is Chuck Turner. I am a former city councilor and a member of the Nubian Square Coalition. I'm here today to discuss the role of the Dudley family in legalizing and maintaining slavery in the beginning of this country in the Mass Bay Colony. By approving this ballot question, you will give to the people of Roxbury the opportunity to remove from the heart of our economic district the name of a family that played a major role in legalizing as well as maintaining the institution of slavery in the Mass Bay Colony. Because of the historical inadequacy of our educational system, I think I need to take a moment to educate those of you who do not know that in 1641, the Governor's Council passed the, quote, Body of Liberties, unquote. While this document guaranteed civil rights to British colonists, paradoxically, or perhaps not paradoxically, it also specified that slavery was allowed in cases where slaves were taken in just wars, Indian wars, or as willing to sell themselves or be sold by us. Through this language, the Puritan established their right to treat as property Native Americans and Africans. That is, the Native Americans were described as those taken in just wars. The Africans were described as strangers who either proposed to sell themselves or whom we proposed to sell. Of course, your question now becomes, what does the Dudley family have to do with the legalizing of slavery in the Mass Bay Colony? The answer is that Thomas Dudley, Puritan patriarch of the Dudley family, played a significant role in every aspect of the Mass Bay Colony political life, from his arrival from England in 1630 as the deputy governor to Governor Winthrop, to his death 23 years later in 1653. The Encyclopedia of Britannica describes him as, quote, the most influential man in the Mass Bay Colony for many years, save for John Winthrop, end quote. Specifically, Thomas Dudley served 13 one-year terms as deputy governor from 1630 to 1650, as well as served 4 terms as governor, 1634 to 1635, 1640 to 1641, 1645 to 1646, and 1650 to 1651. Given that he spent 17 of his 23 years of life in Mass Bay Colony immersed in the political life, he obviously was involved in every aspect of the Puritan political action. From banning of heretics such as Anne Hutchinson in 1638, in the waging of war against the Pequot Indians from 1636 to 1638, and the selling of Pequot captives in 1638 as slaves in the West Indies in exchange for African slaves being brought to Mass Bay Colony to serve the Puritans. Given this history, the passage of the, quote, body of liberty is clearly a continuation of Dudley's pattern of political action. While he died in 1653, his death did not stop the Puritan government's continuing its assault on the liberty of Africans and Native Americans. In 1670, children of slave women were declared to be slaves for life. Let me repeat that. In 1670, children of slaves, women, that is Native American women and African women, were declared to be slaves for life. In 1707, 54 years after the death of his father, Governor Joseph Dudley, demonstrating his commitment to maintaining the slavery system, initiated a 5-shilling fine on any free black person who helped a runaway slave. Those of us who support the name change believe that anyone who learns the history of the Dudley family role in establishing and maintaining slavery in the Mass Bay Colony can understand why the Dudley name needs to be removed from the commercial district that serves as the heart of Roxbury's economic life. The question you might raise is, why use the name of Nubian Square to replace Dudley Square? My personal view is that for almost 400 years, we have been under the mental and emotional domination of the Dudley puritanical vision that while people of color do have souls, we are destined by God to be under the domination of whites. It is time for right-thinking people to rid themselves of this devilish, destructive vision with the spirit of the African Nubian concept that our ancestors brought into this country, that cooperation between all human beings is the only way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Turner. Eleanor Abdal Kalak Williams, followed by Louis Elisa, who will be followed by Alex Mitchell, who will be followed by my good friend Jumata Smith. Welcome, and if you could just state your name and affiliation for the record, Eleanor.
Okay. Greetings, everyone. In many cultures, names and their significance are important. My name is Eleanor Larissa Abdulhalik Williams, and I am a resident and homeowner in Roxbury, where I was raised and remain. I am here in support of the name change of Dudley Square to Nubian Square, and ask for your support in creating and honoring a tribute to Black and brown people who have invested in Roxbury within a city that continues to reinforce white privilege, systematic racial inequities, and economic disparities. For me, the reason for the name change is quite clear. One, it is a step forward towards addressing a need for the representation and inclusion of Black people, even as white privilege and gentrification are on the rise. Secondly, it addresses a need to recognize, honor, and celebrate the contributions of Blacks in Boston, particularly in Roxbury. A Nubian Notion Incorporated is my family's business, which was established in Dudley Square, started by my grandfather, Malik Abdulhalik, and managed for over 40 years by my dad, Jacob Abdulhalik. As an heir to my family's legacy, filled with sacrifice and service, I am quite familiar with Dudley Square and its history of having been maintained and sustained by Black and brown business owners, Black patrons, a few culturally diverse white supporters, and its Black residents, even as the city of Boston repeatedly failed to financially support and maintain it. Throughout my 49 years, the square is where I have experienced an extension of family. It is where I have received affirmation as a Black woman, felt a sense of community, and witnessed the creativity, resilience, and fortitude of my race, despite shared trials and oppressions. It is within intentional circles and spaces within Dudley that I have had the opportunity to see Black people experience a sense of belonging, dignity, and respect amongst one another. In my experience, Black folks didn't travel down to the square to celebrate Dudley, one of many white men whose name serves as a reminder of white privilege and the state of oppression that continues to plague us. No, we went there to celebrate us. Some might ask, why rename the square Nubian Square? Well, I ask, why not? Isn't Nubian a name that we as informed Black and brown people of African descent can relate to in our efforts to be united and better our state, in light of the fact that our forefathers were stripped of their identity and from the motherland and dispersed throughout the world to cities like Boston, where they were and or continue to be mistreated, used for free or cheap labor, and systematically denied equitable opportunities and representation. I challenge those who oppose. Why not change the name Dudley Square to Nubian Square and have our commercial district, a major hub, be given a name that reflects those who held the square up when it was forgotten, neglected, abandoned, and treated like the unwanted stepchild of Boston? Why not change Dudley Square to a name we choose, Nubian, one that reflects a people and race and no one person? Nubian of Nubia, a region between Egypt and Sudan where my grandfather traveled in the 1960s and 70s, saw himself, manifested his vision, and made his journey with gifts from the motherland across the Atlantic, back to America, to those who could identify with and appreciate the culture expressed through those goods. Nubia, a name that reflects the home of empires, a place known for its business affairs and trades of resources along the Nile, a place known for its rich culture and tradition of diverse languages. Changing Dudley Square to Nubian Square is a step towards equality and inclusion for all in our city. It offers a counter-narrative that says Black and brown people are still here in this city, that we matter, and that our strengths and contributions as those of African descent deserve to be recognized and celebrated. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. Luis, good to see you again. If you would state your name and affiliation for the record.
Good afternoon. My name is Louis Elisa. I live at 68 Cedar Street in Roxbury. I've been a resident of Boston since 1972, coming here for graduate school and being captured by the interesting culture. And good evening, afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the City Council and those here. I came in support of the name change from Dudley Square to Nubian Square for a number of reasons. First, I think a people should be able to identify and name themselves and their community. I think it's important that for people to continue to be a part of this society, they must see themselves in a positive light. While people ask whether any of the Dudley family had ever owned slaves, I could not tell you succinctly. But I could not also tell you that Hermann Goering or Adolf Reichmann had any direct contact in affecting the life of any German Jew, but nobody would put a statue or a monument to them any place in this city, state, or nation, regardless, because of the repugnant nature of who and what they were and what they did. This is the same thing for the Dudley family and the name Dudley in an area, in a community that was demonized and set upon by the Puritans of that time. Of course, they went through a process using the Puritan Church and others to not just destroy the lives of Africans and African Americans, but also the Pequot and other Native Americans here. Their history is wretched. What they've done was so inhumane and despicable that to have the name on any public plaque is a disgrace to humanity, though we want to argue whether or not we should change that name in a community of people who have been set upon for the last 400 years, in terms of whether or not they should be able to choose an area that they shop and have hopes for economic growth and development or future for their children, to something that's more positive. I think it's without question that I'm not able to turn to my children and say, Dudley is a name that we could revere, that we should respect, because his history and what they've done and why they did it is so deplorable. It is the role of a city and a nation to uphold all of its people. I will not recount the role that African Americans have played in this country, but the history of African Americans in Boston is outstanding. It is well known that the downtown area of Boston in which we live was the home in the beginning for most Africans who lived in the West End and North End, that they patrolled the downtown streets of Boston when we were not connected with Roxbury, which was a suburb, and they provided the first group for safety. They had a militia group that basically patrolled the streets so that the citizens of Boston at the time who were under colonial rule would not be set upon by thugs and parts of the military that came over from England to keep the colony under control. So the role of African Americans is well known. It's established through Prince Hall and others who advocated and fought in the in the Continental Army under George Washington. It was reestablished when Prince Hall spoke at the State House, trying to establish the first African school in the United States and building the first school over there on Joy Street. I mean, these things are historic, but the role of African Americans in America is one that has to be respected and uplifted. Keeping the name of Dudley overshadowing this community takes away from our humanity, takes away from the understanding that we should not be celebrating, applauding, or even giving reference to someone who was very much involved in the destruction of humanity of African Americans and Native Americans in the manner in which is historically documented that the Dudley and the Dudley family involved themselves in. So we come here asking you to look at why it's important to change the name from Dudley to Nubian Square, why it's important to give a generation of young men and women hope for the future, why it's important to say to those who are past their senior, in their majority, why we now recognize the fact that we may have done them a disservice by having them to work and labor and travel through an area that was under a shadow of a person who was not humane enough to give them respect as human beings. The change is not uncommon in the city of Boston. Areas do reflect the people who live in there. When I came to Boston in '72, the stop after the medical center was called Essex Street. It's now called Chinatown. It's a very good change in the name. It reflects the community that's there, and it gives people an understanding what the culture is that, in its sense, predominates the area. Changing Dudley to Nubian Square will say the same thing to everybody else, that we understand, recognize, and support the ideas and aspirations of African-American people in the city of Boston who've given so much to this nation. They are part of our founding fathers. They've been a part of our leadership. They've been a part of the growth and development of this city, and to have them to continue to live and labor under the shadow of a man like Dudley is not fair to them, and our changing that name would show recognition that we are aware that they have a right to determine the quality of life in which they live. So I will just end by saying I hope that each of the council will take in consideration that we're not asking you to change the name to something that would be difficult for people to understand. Nubia basically says African or black, or it's a part of the world that historically the world came to. When you know the culture of Europe and you know the culture of Africa, you know that a lot of the history and a lot of the growth of Europe came from Egypt and Africa, particularly from the northern and southern part of the Sudan and all of Egypt, that brought medicine and science to the world. That the Greeks came to Nubia and studied in the Khartoum and different places and took knowledge and information back. So that can't be very difficult leap for people to make. But the question is whether or not we can make that leap, and in our hearts and our conscience, name a community, name an area within a community that will give hope and aspirations for generations to come. Thank you.
Thank you, Luis. Alex Mitchell, please state your name and affiliation for the record. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Mitchell. I'm a student at Boston University. I am a resident of Roxbury. My family's been living in Grove Hall since my grandmother moved from Barbados. Basically, I think that Dudley Square should be renamed. I think that the past of the Dudleys, the history, it's wrong, and it shouldn't be the name of a majority African-American neighborhood. But at the same time, I believe personally renaming it to Nubian Square is somewhat hypocritical, because in the past the Nubian Empire utilized slaves themselves, and Sudan, they had slavery until up to 2005, and they've also had genocide in Darfur in the past decade, and also the fact that this region was also a part of the Arab slave trade as well as the European slave trade. And I just believe that if we end up changing the name of Dudley Square, which we definitely should as a city, this is a really, really big opportunity to celebrate someone from Boston, an African American from Boston that worked for other African Americans, such as Martin Luther King, Elma Lewis, Bill Russell. There's so many people from Boston that could represent us, and people from Boston would be able to relate to more than Nubian, because at the end of the day, African Americans have been going through so much struggle in America, but what is Sudan, what has Africa done for the African Americans in the U.S.? And that's not necessarily it's not necessarily something we should celebrate, the people that let us go away and didn't try to help us afterwards. But at the same time, there are always other factors, and the European slave trade was a big factor in a lot of African Americans coming over. But at the same time, there are no programs in Sudan today helping African Americans come over there and help and just have a bigger community. I think the best name for the square would probably be Louis Farrakhan Square, since he was all about like going back to Africa and having just like Pan-Africanism. But if we name it Nubian Square, we're kind of just like we're missing an opportunity to honor Boston and like the people from Boston that have worked for us.
Good. Thank you for your time and attention to this issue, Alex. And for full disclosure, Alex just finished his internship in my office, so he's on to great things over at BU. So good to see you again. And last but not least, my good friend Jamada Smith. Great to see you, Jamada. If you can state your name and affiliation.
Thank you. My name is Jamada Smith, and I want to thank the mayor in his absence, Mayor Marty Walsh, and City Councilor Flaherty, and also chair of this government operations. I definitely want to thank District 7 City Councilor Kim Janey, City Councilor Michelle Wu for your presence, City Councilor Flynn, and City Councilor O'Malley for your presence, for being here. I also want to thank Jerome Smith. Yeah, and I want to thank Keith Williams, because they have kind of helped us walk through this process, and I just think it's in order. I also want to recognize who we call the Honorable Mel King. He, in fact, is an honorary chairperson of the Nubian Square Coalition. But as I said, my name is Jamada Abdelhalik Henry Smith, and my family and I are long-term residents of Roxbury and in Dorchester. And I was around long enough for a lot of Roxbury now is Dorchester. But I am a proud product of the Boston Public School system. Can I quickly say the David A. Ellis, the Henry L. Higginson, the Lewis Junior High, and the Jeremiah E. Burke High School for Girls. And so I'm standing here, and I want to just quickly say just a few places, a few organizations that I belong to. For those who don't know me, just kind of emphasize that I'm very serious and I have civic responsibilities. I'm a part of, not necessarily in this order of importance, of the greater, I'm on the strategy team and the leader with the Greater Boston Interfaith Organization. I'm with the City of Boston. I'm with Age Strong. I'm on the Age Friendly Task Force. I was one of the initial members of the Dudley Vision Advisory Task Force. I think we worked 8 years on all of the B2, the bowling building. Also, I'm with what I named Roxbury Collaborative. And we're the ones that do Patriots Day, you know, where William Dawes rides through Roxbury. I'm part of the Veterans and Friends of Gordine Memorial Park, which is right across from the B2. And we're putting up a statue of Gordine just to recognize that we don't show very much about the African American veteran. I'm also a member of the Organization of African American Veterans. And church-wise, I'm a member of St. Catherine Drexel Parish and an affiliate member of Grand African Methodist Episcopal Church. And so I wanted to say, and of course I'm here like the others, it's kind of time for us to put on our, I'm saying, spiritual sneakers and just do the right thing. It's not that I don't care about who was a slave owner and who wasn't. I think that's very important, and it's important to a lot of people. But, you know, it's just time to do the right thing. At my Catholic church, during Eucharist, that's when we get communion, and every single day we have Mass. And part of the prayer is we talk about doing what is just and right. And, you know, sometimes you just do the right thing. And so much is going on. You know, people are talking about reparation now and things like that. All we have to do is try to fix things. I know that Councilor Janie was talking earlier, and she's talking about the conditions and the wealth gap and everything like that, which I get. And I've heard people say, well, I want to see this and that, but can't we do this simultaneously? You know, we don't have to just do one thing, you know, and none of us can do it all, but all of us could do something. So we can be on this, all the same bandwagon. The goal is not about my children, not about my grandchildren, maybe my great-grand, but it's about the future of the children. And they need to be able to just kind of go through. So this is my plea. And let me see, I have a young girl in the community, and I'm going to tell you all this. I just recently lost my husband. So I'm not trying to get any empathy or sympathy or anything like that, but that's kind of why I'm not my regular self. But also, I missed the senior cruise today because I said I better be here, because if something doesn't go right, it's because I wasn't here. So everybody else is on the cruise, and so I missed it. But so you all just gonna have to bear with me. So one of the things I do want to say, and I don't know how much I'm not gonna be very long, and this is what's kind of cute. I was doing something for somebody in the community, and I asked the young lady at the Freedom House, I took a picture of my notes because I didn't have a chance, and the child wanted it to be big for me, so don't y'all talk about me having these big pieces of paper here. So what I want to say is this. I'm going to say this quickly. Last Tuesday marked the 400th anniversary of the landing of enslaved Africans on the shores of what the British colony of Virginia. And on August the 10th of 1619, 20 Angolans were brought to Point Comfort, Virginia, and that is now Hampton Roads, and they were sold to British settlers. Fast forward, in 1976, we celebrated the bicentennial of our country. Although the focus of the year was July 4th, 1776, and the Declaration of Independence, no thought, no memory, no attention was given to any events such as what occurred at Point Comfort, Virginia. Now, if the United States of America and our precious city of Boston is to look to 2026 with any expectation of celebrating her sesquicentennial, then the preparations must begin now. These preparations would not entail planning and parades and concerts and extravaganzas, but it should provide opportunities for rehealing, for reconciliation, and occasions for unifying a fractured society. And if we do indeed hold these truths to be self-evident, that all people are created by God with unalienable rights, then we must be willing to stand side by side with every resident of this city, demanding liberty and justice for all. And so what we need to try to fix some things. And I really see this as a way to help fix. And, you know, I'm kind of old school, and back in the day, there was this rhythm and blues song, and my husband was a rhythm and blues singer. And the song was, "Ain't Too Proud to Beg." I am not too proud to beg you all. And you all know the famous late James Brown, who said, "Please, please, please, please." I really hope and pray to God that we don't have to go out and try to get 40,000 votes. I mean, all we're asking you to do is to vote yes to at least get the ballot, you know? And so that's my plea. I probably have some more notes on here, but Councilor Flaherty is so sweet, he's going to let me finish. Okay, so thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you, Jamada. We've also been joined by my colleague, City Councilor Michelle Wu. Anyone else wishing to offer any additional public testimony may do so now. Seeing and hearing no additional desire for public testimony, that will conclude the public testimony standpoint. Jerome, you want to get a final word?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out, again, I want to thank all the councilors today for allowing us to come down. As you see and heard from the testimony, this is a sincere effort. The organizers have went from going old school style with, petitions and signature letters to sitting down and trying to understand a complex thing such as a citizen's question. Every time I directed them to do something such as create an official ballot question committee and go to OCPF and file, they went and did it. They're now fundraising money. They've created mailers. They had a huge contingent with banners at the Caribbean Festival Parade. They were part of that whole organization. They have sincerely come forward to ask us to help them talk to their residents. I know that I just want to reiterate on behalf of the Walsh administration to take the opportunity to again commit our support to this community coalition effort to engage the residents of Roxbury to see about whether or not they want to change the name of Dudley Square. I hope the council will join us. And again, if the council should have any further questions, feel free to ask. We're learning about this all together as we engage in this civic engagement exercise. But I do hope that the council can support us as we move this issue forward. Thank you.
Councilor Janey has a couple questions.
Thank you so much. So just in terms of understanding the process, now you mentioned earlier that the entire city will get to vote on this.
Yes.
How will we then determine that Roxbury gets to, in fact, name itself and that those votes are the ones that will be counted? Are you then now looking at those earlier identified precincts as the precincts to count?
So-
and is there agreement with the coalition that that is the way to go?
So we do not want to publicly say that we are not going to listen to any voter who decides to vote one way or another. Again, that's why I phrase it to the council. The council should look at this less as a ballot question and more as a polling data. It is our intention to offer to the chair of the PIC to weight the precincts that have been previously identified by the coalition ourselves. So as he gets all the data as the chair of the PIC, I had asked him to put close attention to the 10 wards and precincts that we decided when we originally were going to go for the neighborhood-wide process, that we give that section emphasis. And then I also have instructed that the coalition members will have a chance to sit with the chair and the members of the team who will be drafting the regs, and they will see all that happen. So they will be, from the very start to the very end, the Nubian Square coalition members will be at the table as we move through that part of the process. Again, this is new, first time we're doing it, and I want to make sure because once we do this, as of everything, it's precedent setting, and then you never know if another group pops up, so that's why we're methodically going step by step by step now, and we'll make sure the coalition members are with us at every step of the way.
I appreciate that. Just a couple more questions, and I'm not sure that you'll be able to answer here. I don't see anyone from economic development, but one question or a concern that's come up from at least some of the businesses is that we've invested a lot in this name of Dudley. Will there be support from the city in terms of branding, rebranding, if in fact the name is changed, for businesses who were kind of organized and wedded around the old name? How will they be supported in getting resources if they need to change their
banners,
sign? If they want to change their sign, they can keep, Dudley or whatever, but what support will be available from the city?
It is absolutely a concern of ours, and that is why we asked the applicants to do such a broad outreach, right? That's why we're doing this question, because there's a number of businesses who have tied their name to the square. As you know, Councilor, you pointed out in the beginning, there are a number of other fronts, both my office, your office, and the Economic Development Office, that we are already doing in Dudley to try to help the business of Dudley. You've had a number of large community meetings where the residents have come together to kind of decide not the name, but how they want the square to feel and events. We want to continue with that. And so my commitment from my office is that should those businesses step forward and say that we do need technical assistance, I will make every effort to make sure that those departments who have that ability are sent there to provide the attention over there, because the last thing we want to do is hurt a thriving business currently in Dudley by this process. It's meant for everybody to come together. And to the young gentleman's question who he's not clear about Nubian, but that's the point of this. The point of this is to go out and to have a dialogue and discussion. It is not the mayor making a decree. It's not the city council making a decree. All that we are doing is allow residents to talk. And I think that young gentleman, if he cares so passionately, I would love to see him involved in this space, talking with the residents, because I know the Nubian Square Coalition are ready to go. They've already started door knocking and calling, and they've been working actively. And so I, again, as Chief of Civic Engagement, am really looking forward to seeing how this works. We talk about different things that we do with the 311 app. Can we allow more user interface? We're engaging with the media team, the web team, about how to do community meetings online. I know D&D does a lot of the online stuff with some of their properties. So how do we marry the neighborhood association meetings with the civic association meetings, with the condo association meetings, and then providing individuals who can't attend these rigid time meetings, how can they still give input? So we have been trying, and when my cabinet was created 4 years ago, we've been trying to think about how the city just does this as broad and fine-tune those places. So again, this is an exercise that I have never been a part of, and I'm actually keenly kind of paying attention to because I want to see how this works for the city of Boston.
I think the last thing that I would say, Chief Smith, is I just want to thank you because I know from my engagement with the coalition, my engagement with you in your office, that you've put in a lot of time in working with the coalition, and I know it's not always easy.
Yep.
Trust me. I am blessed to have a district where there is a lot of passion, there are a lot of activists who care deeply about our community, and sometimes how that is communicated may not feel good to the person on the receiving end of that, but you've heard great testimony here. As I said in the beginning, I think it is very important that a community get to name itself. When I was a little girl growing up in the 1970s in Roxbury, we in my family, we actually had naming ceremonies for all my younger brothers and sisters. I mean, it's a big deal with certain African American, I'm not sure other, cultural and racial groups, it's a big deal what you call yourself. And so it is a very important conversation. I think that the people should decide and have the ability to determine for themselves whether or not they want to change the name from Dudley Square to Nubian Square, and grateful that they will have that opportunity on November 5th. I support the effort to let the people decide and will be encouraging my colleagues, many of whom are here today, but those who are not, to support this so that the council will pass it, have the mayor sign it, and then November 5th, the people can decide.
Appreciate it, Councilor.
Thank you. Council Flynn has a follow-up question.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I just want to echo what Councilor Janey said in her comments. There was excellent testimony here, and I certainly support the position of Councilor Janey. And just going back to the excellent testimony that was provided by the residents, is there any way that we could use that testimony to let other people know about the importance of this issue that might not be in the impacted area?
Okay. So I have been thinking about, because I believe that some of the councilors, particularly the district councilors, will probably be getting phone calls about this. So what we are going to do administratively is the Elections Commission is already going to put the ballot question on the website. That'll be their normal course. I'm thinking that through the Office of Civic Engagement, we will also post the ballot question, and then I'll work with getting contact information from the coalition, and we're going to present that also. Anybody member of the public can be directed to these sites to get additional information, or if they want to contact the coalition, we'll do it that way. So any information that councilors feel is helpful, if I have not put it on the website, feel free to grab me, and we can get that up within a couple hours. But I'll be putting as much information as we can so that any residents can go directly there to seek the information that they're looking for.
Thank you, Jerome. And I just was moved by the testimony from so many people here tonight on the incredible contributions of African American veterans, teachers, business people, often not receiving the credit. I spoke earlier about, I think Councilor Turner also spoke about the Native American community as well. I had a large population at one time in my community, and there's so many different ethnic groups across our city that do so much great work but never receive any type of credit or recognition for helping build the city or helping build this country. I'm proud to represent the Puerto Rican veterans in the South End as well, but I'm just so proud of the outstanding contributions of our African American veterans and families that have really helped build this city without any credit. Not that they're looking for credit, but they really helped build and make this city what it is. So I just want to say thank you to the participants for being here and for being active, being engaged. And again, thank you to the panelists and especially to my colleague, Councilor Janey.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Chair recognizes Councilor O'Malley for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just had a brief sort of procedural question, but first a comment. Appreciated all of your comments and certainly the members of the public who gave very compelling testimony. Jerome, you had mentioned several times the gaming question, which was the last time there was a ward specific. The way that legislation was written was that any city or town with a population of more than 100,000 people could affirmatively opt to have a ward vote or a citywide vote, depending on a vote of the council. I was the only member serving at the time. I was also the sole vote against the ward-only vote for a whole host of reasons, not the least of which is that this would affect, had the casino, would affect every neighborhood in city services. I had asked specifically, could we have a citywide vote with special weighting of members of East Boston Ward 1, and was told affirmatively that we could not. So I'm delighted and agree with your interpretation and the legal department's interpretation. It was a different administration back then, so I think that is right.
And I have that, Neil is going to get that legal memo to you guys, so you guys will have it.
Great, and this is my question. Does that memo include the 10 precincts that, recognizing this is a non-binding referendum, but we're using it as a poll, so to speak, will that list those 10 precincts?
The memo does not, but I can get that information to you.
Yes, because is that just every precinct in Roxbury, or those specifically around?
So originally, what we thought we had the ability to do was to get that ward, what you had that debate on. We were getting down on the wards. We had sat with the group, and Councilor Turner has a map, and some of the precincts of Roxbury bleed into other neighborhoods. And
such as Eggleston Square and Jamaica
So we
Plain.
had a fundamental conversation that we truly needed to make sure everybody in Roxbury got to vote.
Yeah.
And if your precinct bled into another, that doesn't mean that you lose your Roxbury voice. So we told the coalition members that they were, because that is how voting works, you had to allow that in. And eventually they understood that, okay, some of Fenway, some of the South End, some of Dorchester are gonna, some of JP are gonna hit this. We understand that. It's not a greater percentage, but as long as the Roxbury precincts, all of Roxbury is included, they felt comfortable. And so we agreed what those precincts were. Like I said, how new we were at this, we were literally looking if we can cut streets out. Literally like, okay, so you have precinct 9-3, but this part of it is actually Fenway. Can we cut it out? How would we figure out who and that voted where? It just got really messy very quickly, and that's when like I said, this is pure citizen-driven, all of us learning together, and then we fundamentally came that we're going to have to do precincts. It's the easiest, cleanest way. Let us decide on which ones. And the coalition are holding me to the precincts that we've decided on.
Good. So I'd love to see those just ahead of time. Agree with you. If anyone, the debates about neighborhood boundaries and where it begins are legendary in this town. So that's helpful. And then my follow-up to Commissioner and Registrar is, what's the deadline we would need to vote on this so that you all and your team would be ready for ballots? Obviously, this will not be on the preliminary ballot. It will be on the November ballot. So what's the deadline for you guys for action by the council and the mayor?
Master Law, Chapter 53 says 35 days.
Yeah.
35?
So we wrote this down because we thought it would be a question. From us, September 18th will give them sufficient amount of time to get it on the ballot. We could go a week after that, but you're cutting it close with their ballot production.
Okay, and just so folks here know, of course, through the chair, the next council meeting is September 11th, so that would, the time sort of
so that the 18th, for us for nothing to happen with printing and things like that, the 18th councilor will give us sufficient amount of time to execute the ballots.
Okay, great. Thank you all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilor. And one final question, because we have a 2 o'clock hard stop. But,
No.
Councilor Janey.
I'm good. I just want to, again, thank everyone for their advocacy, for their engagement, for their leadership, for their organizing. I was knocking on doors myself last night, and there were residents who were showing me, oh, do you know about this? So that's great. Keep up the good work. Again, I think it's important that the people decide, and so we'll be encouraging my colleagues to vote to pass this through the council so that clearly we're not going to ask people to go out and get 10,000 signatures or spend a lot 40,000 signatures or spend a lot more money, which is what I'm hearing from the elections department too. So thank you.
Thank you, councilors. Appreciate it.
So thank you all for your time and attention. Obviously, our chief, our commissioner, our register, and we'll have a committee report turn around, most likely probably on September the 18th. So I do what Jamada tells me to do. So that's the plan. But
I'm going to have her at all council hearings going forward.
Thank you for all those that participated, for your active testimony, and look forward to getting something turned around pretty quick.
Thank you, councilors.
Thank you very much. The committee on the docket 0830 is adjourned.